So Doug Ford talks a big game about locking up criminals, but it turns out the incompetence of his government has caused dozens of criminals to walk free in Ontario many months before their sentences were up. So behind me is the Toronto South Detention Centre in Etobicoke, not far from where my family and I live. And a convicted criminal named Awale Ismail Hassan spent a year here in this jail after he was arrested on August 26, 2022. Earlier that month, Mr. Hassan had fired a loaded gun during an argument, and he later pled guilty to possessing a loaded firearm without a permit. So on September 6, 2023, he walked free out of this jail. That was 12 months and 11 days after he was first brought here. But the funny thing is, the day before he walked, on September 5th of 2023, Mr. Hassan was sentenced downtown to 2 years less a day. So he was sentenced to 2 years for a serious and dangerous firearm offense, but only served 12 months and 11 days before he was set free. So what happened to the other 354 days that Mr. Hassan owed to society? Some people might be thinking right now he must have been paroled, but that's not what happened. Instead, those 354 days went into what is called pretrial credits. Pretrial custody credits for being imprisoned before you're tried. Okay, so let's back up, because understanding this idea of credits for pretrial custody takes a little bit of background. Basically, our law considers it problematic for people to be imprisoned before they're tried, because our Constitution says that everyone is presumed innocent until you are proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a trial. And of course, sometimes people are charged who actually are completely innocent and were wrongfully arrested. Now, it would be great if the criminal justice system could give people fair trials within days after they were arrested and then immediately let the innocent people go while sentencing the others. But having a fair trial takes a lot of preparation for the lawyers and the witnesses and so on. And it's considered more important that the trial be fair, even if that means it can't happen immediately. So people are going to be incarcerated before trial. But if a person's denied bail and they're in a place like Toronto South here before they're being tried and then they're convicted and sentenced, then they need to get credit for the time that they served beforehand. So that's called the Summers credit, where you get days reduced from your sentence because of the time you were incarcerated before the trial. But back to Mr. Hassan. Even with that Summers credit, Mr. Hassan still owed society almost 6 months more imprisonment than what he actually served. So what happened to those 6 months? Well, they were wiped off the slate by something called a Duncan credit. So the Duncan credit comes from the legal principle that if the government lets conditions become awful enough inside the jail, then the convict gets extra credit for the time which they spent there before trial. Justice Himmel, who sentenced Mr. Hassan, found that things are so bad inside this building behind me that Mr. Hassan had to be let out 6 months earlier than he otherwise would be. Justice Himmel and many other judges who have commented on this and done similar things in sentencing pointed out two key problems with this jail and with many others across Ontario. First of all is overcrowding. So Toronto South was designed with cells that are 7.5 feet by 15 feet, which is smaller than a Ford F-150 truck. And those are designed for 2 people. They have 2 bunks and 1 window. I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but the windows are frosted over, so no one can see anything looking out them. So that's okay under our law and our Constitution for 2 people. Obviously, it's not a hotel. But the problem is triple bunking, because the government has failed to build enough jails, and so people end up triple bunked. We end up with 3 people in those tiny rooms, with the 3rd person sleeping on the floor next to the toilet. Toronto South Detention Centre is at 119% of its capacity. The second big problem is understaffing. The government has failed to hire enough staff to keep this place running properly, which means that people are locked down for many, many months, and they have no access to anything along the lines of classes for rehabilitation or religious services or exercise or family visits or anything that might help them get their lives back on track. So our Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishments. And if you treat people like rats in cages, then there are going to be legal consequences. Specifically, the Duncan credits, right? Which lead to prisoners being released long before they have served their full sentences. And the provincial government, Doug Ford's government, is 100% responsible for what happens behind these walls. Allowing prisons like this one to fall below the constitutional standard has put dozens of convicted criminals back on the streets months or in some cases years early. So there's some terrific reporting from the Toronto Star that basically shows it's the same story across the province. Almost all of the 25 jails in this province are overcrowded, which means that people across the province are being set free early and subjected to inhumane conditions in jail. Everybody who goes into these places comes out eventually. And if we want to be safe, we got to think about when they're coming out, whether they're serving their full sentences, and whether they're being treated in a way which perhaps increases the chance that they are going to reoffend in the future. Our Premier talks a really big game about keeping criminals behind bars and blaming other levels of government. But the provincial government can't keep Ontarians safe unless it's competent enough to run the criminal justice system and run the jails. And that doesn't seem to be happening. And I think it's time we demand better.